Hey, it's Pete Mundo. Before the podcast starts, could you do us a favor at KCMO? We don't ask you for much outside of supporting our sponsors and advertisers. Could you leave us a 5-star rating and review? Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Helps us a lot. We so appreciate you doing that. Let's see. Are we up to -5 yet? Nah, still at -7. Dang it. Oh, man. All right. We're going to get there eventually. Good morning. It is great to be here on a frigid Thursday morning across Kansas City where, yes, it is right now at Corporate Woods, -7 degrees, and it feels like -14, John.
Coldest show we've ever done, right?
You know what? I think so because the Miami Dolphins playoff game, that was on a weekend, obviously. So that would have been a weekend when we were not here. So this must be the coldest show we have done in the history of Mundo in the Morning. So you're here for it. You're listening to history on the other side of the microphone. Welcome in. I'll put on my big radio voice guy and say hello to you. So I've got some news here, breaking news here, that nobody else in Kansas City media has its hand on yet. And that is a lawsuit that is set to be filed by multiple Jackson County, Missouri legislators against County Executive Frank White Jr. This includes Sean Smith, Donna Payton, Darren McGee, Manuel Abarca IV. Some may know him as Manny. And then Vanessa Husky. They are getting set to file a lawsuit against Frank White. We've got a copy of this draft. Keatsman was the first one to get his hands on this, and he will have plenty more at 10 o'clock this morning. But I started making some calls on this yesterday, and what this lawsuit is about Frank White's inability to approve a budget given to him by the legislature. Now, we know that there is no love lost between the Jackson County legislature and Jackson County Executive Frank White, who, yes, once was pretty good at baseball. But now we're in a place where they literally cannot work together on behalf of you, the taxpayer in Jackson County. They've all let you down to some degree, but Frank White is now totally checked out. That's what's going on here. They were supposed to pass a budget that would begin in January. We're 7 weeks into the new year, and they don't have a 2025 budget. So I'm looking at this lawsuit here. It's, 10 pages, like a standard lawsuit. It's probably twice as long as it needs to be. But, hey, the lawyer's got to make some money, right? They got to earn a little cheese. And it notes here that the realtors bring this action to challenge respondent, Jackson County Executive Frank White Jr.'s veto of the entire Jackson County budget submitted to his office on December 31st, 2024, and vetoed on January 9th, 2025. So we are going into potentially the third month where Jackson County, Missouri has not passed a budget, like for right now, for this year. Despite the fact that this county has absolutely no problem taking more and more of your money through property taxes. They've run one of the biggest scams that I've ever seen in my life in this tax assessment that they handled 2 years ago. And the way that they jacked up the assessments 30, 40, 50, 60, 100+% on some people and basically said tough luck. In many cases, did not appear to abide by the law, which required a physical inspection of some kind of depth. Made it impossible for people to try to fight these insane tax assessments. Basically told you to pound sand. And now, on the back end of all this, they can't put together a budget, and you've got now legislators suing Frank White over this. So what's the end game? I've had people insist to me that it's not about getting Frank White out of office. I don't believe that for a second. I think they want Frank White out. I think they realize they can't work with this guy anymore. And frankly, I think Frank is largely checked out to this point. I don't think Frank White really is interested in this job anymore. There are some things that maybe have been going on in his personal life that would suggest he's not as interested in the day-to-day. He's got a staff that largely handles the day-to-day. But we do know he's a very proud man. And He's not going to go down without some kind of figurative fight. So what does any of this look like? What does it mean for you, the Jackson County taxpayer, the Jackson County resident? It means your entire county is not functioning right now. I mean, it is. They're doing the basics, but they're literally working without a budget. Imagine your business right now. If you're a small business owner in Kansas City right now, you're waking up, you're drinking your coffee, you're getting ready for the day. Imagine operating without any kind of a budget. That's what's going on in Jackson County, Missouri today. And then, of course, the backdrop of all of this is the sports teams. You've got two professional sports franchises trying to figure out their future. They both currently reside in a county and may want to continue in a county to some degree that is dysfunctional beyond belief. What does that mean for the Kansas City Chiefs? What does it mean for the Kansas City Royals? Well, I don't know everything going on with these teams behind the scenes, but I can tell you right now, they're getting antsy. That's undeniable. They're getting antsy, and they don't know if they can get anything done in the county of Jackson County because of how poorly the place is run, and not even just run poorly, like not even being run. It's not clear who's in charge of anything right now. You got a county executive that's in the process of potentially getting recalled by the voters. In the meantime, he's totally checked out. His staff's running the show. The legislature, I don't want to give him too much credit. I think a couple of folks on that legislature are trying to do right by the people, but it's not exactly a group of Mensa members. I'll say that much about the Jackson County legislature. So you got all this stuff coming together at a time when these ball teams are trying to figure out where they're going to be playing into the next decade. This could not be a worse time in the history of Jackson County to have this level of incompetency taking place in the county legislature. If this was 10 years ago, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. I mean, it would be for the citizen, but in terms of the future of the ball teams, it'd be like, well, I mean, they're here. There's 15 years left on the contract. There's 5-6 years left on these deals. The Royals are wanting to get out of, obviously, the Truman Sports Complex. They might want to stay in Jackson County and need some county help along the way, but that relationship with Frank White is dead. I mean, we know that there's been issues there for 35, 40 years at this point, but now it's dead. And then the Chiefs are looking at this saying, what do we do? Where do we want to go? How do we want to function? How do we want to operate? And it's not clear that there's really been anything addressed on that front. And you've got Kansas with this dopey Star Bond deal on the other side, licking their chops, hoping that, the incompetency of Jackson County will drive the Chiefs into their arms. That's what they're hoping right now. So this is all the stuff that is right now bubbling under the surface. This is where these situations are in your backyard, and this county is a complete and utter mess. And don't forget, you've got some of these assessments that are going to be rolling out in the months ahead while the lawsuit's going on, apparently, between lawmakers and the county executive to fix and figure out a 2025 budget. John, you can't make this up.
No, I was going to say Netflix is circling for the rights to this, baby.
Oh, my gosh, if only. Someone's got to be telling this story because it is arguably criminal what is happening right here in Jackson County. 913-408-7957. Glad you're here on KCMO Talk Radio on a frigid Thursday morning across Kansas City. 913-408-7957. In the meantime, Doge could have an impact on Kansas City. What might that look like ahead of our conversation with Mayor Lucas, which is coming up at 7:30? We'll get you the details on that on 95.7 FM KCMO and streaming from your warm home on the Alexa, the Google Home, or the KCMO Talk Radio app. $360 million, that is the number, according to Kansas City Mayor Quinton Lucas, that Kansas City currently receives in total U.S. government grants. The mayor writes that supports help train workers, repair crumbling infrastructure, provides health care to veterans and seniors. The mayor writing this week, we will continue to work to protect investments in our community to build the best city in America. This was a response from Mayor Lucas to Doge. Now, I don't know about you, but if you're a Kansas City resident, or if you're someone who's just, a regional resident, but obviously pays sales taxes to Kansas City when you go there and do business and eat and drink and spend money, my initial reaction to that post from the mayor, and he will be here at 7:30, I will ask him about this and more, is hang on a second here. Repairing infrastructure, you guys don't do like as a basic thing with the tax dollars you get from the taxpayer? Like these are just some of the basic things, repairing crumbling infrastructure that should be a top line expense that every city deals with. Like if you're not fixing your own infrastructure with the tax dollars that you receive from your taxpayers, what else are you possibly doing with it? Like, I understand there are vanity projects and pet projects that come along that, hey, if we got some federal dollars, we'll use it for this, that, the next thing. Like, I understand that, and those fights are always being had at different levels of government. But literally, you pay taxes for what? Pothole repairs, decent roads, fixed bridges, fixed infrastructure, trash pickup, and police. That's kind of what I think of as the basic things that government needs to do on a very local level. Make sure the streets are all right, clean them when it snows, fill in the potholes in the spring. Make sure, you don't have crumbling roads and crumbling bridges and buildings and things of that nature. And, make sure you got a police force and fire department and just kind of do those basics and do it well, right? I mean, that's like number one government issues that you've got to be dealing with if you're a mayor or on any city council. So hearing that the city of Kansas City relies on government grants, U.S. government grants of $360 million, I'm just sitting here and saying to myself, okay, I mean, do they rely on it or do they enjoy having it? Because it's like anything else in life. Think about your own home budget. You and your spouse put together your home budget every month, or maybe it's every year, whatever you guys do, right? And you're like, hey, we got our mortgage payment, we got the electric bill, we got the gas, we got to make sure the cars are taken care of, we got food. Like those are the basic things we need to live. How much we spend on going out to dinner, how much we spend on clothing, how much we spend on a concert down at T-Mobile Center, those things can fluctuate, and those are not necessities. You got to take care of the necessities, and then you can debate and have conversations on the extra spending, the fun spending. The way this is being framed by the mayor in this post is that the U.S. government is in part responsible for the core spending of Kansas City. That would be like your significant other saying, I really can't cut the $500 concert tickets out of the budget this month. We got to get down there to T-Mobile. I can't do it. That is an essential part of our living. We have no choice. Oh, what are we going to do? Not pay the electric bill this month so we can go to a concert down at T-Mobile? Nobody would have sympathy for you if you're like, I can't pay the electric bill this month. You were at that Katy Perry concert last night? I just thought of her because she's going to be here in May. Don't worry, I'm not going. Mark might be going, but I'm not going. You wouldn't do that. That wouldn't make any sense. So I'm not having a lot of sympathy right now, and the fear-mongering of, oh, boy, oh, Doge, they might cut basic infrastructure for Kansas City. Come on now, please. So with that, there's obviously a lot at stake right now. You've got wasteful spending all over the place. But President Trump had quite a tease yesterday. He was speaking, and he said this about some of the wasteful spending that Doge is uncovering, and there may be some big stuff coming our way. Is it not working?
And here are just a few examples of where your money was going before I came along. These are just some of just taken at random. Oh, there are much worse examples than this. I was just looking at them before the speech, and I can tell you they were much worse. And there are some that are horrible, but I don't want to really say them because they're very, very embarrassing. to people. Very, very embarrassing. And they're really something, but you'll be seeing it and you will be reading about it. But just some taken at random, $2 million for sex change operations in Guatemala.
Yes. How are we going to ever survive as a country without the $2 million sex changes in Guatemala? Just some of the money that your tax dollars was going to. I hope that they continue to slice and dice as much as they possibly can. And, you know, I hear the crying and the screaming and the hysteria that's out there. But here's the problem for a lot of people that are trying to, push back on the president and what he's attempting to do. Most people with common sense knows that this has to be done. And frankly, I think there's a lot of Democratic voters who are like, yeah, I'm mostly good with this. And that's why you're seeing the hysteria on the other side insisting that they're going to take away, payments or direct deposits to individuals that'll end up with them, being homeless on the streets. It's like we're talking about getting rid of a bloated bureaucracy. That's what this is really about. Whether it's IRS workers getting laid off in Kansas City today, and that was obviously a big story yesterday that was supposed to come down. I have not seen any numbers on that, but I do know that the president and there were reports yesterday that the IRS is going to begin laying off roughly 6,000 employees today. The New York Times had that last night. The IRS will begin laying off roughly 6,000 employees, and some of those are expected to be here in Kansas City. So all this stuff is happening a mile a minute. But if you really think there's going to be mass outrage and hysteria from the right, or frankly, I think many on the left, you're kidding yourself. It's not going to happen. No matter how much fake enthusiasm they try to drum up. I mean, if you're not a government worker and you're just a hardworking, everyday person and you happen to be a Democrat, are you really going to be shedding tears when you're worried about yourself? You're worried about your own payments? You're worried about making through your day and your own kids and your own 401k? Are you really going to be outraged because Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and AOC are freaking out about people at the IRS getting laid off? No, you're not. Normal people are not going to feel that way. They're just not. No matter how much they try to fake a high level of enthusiasm around this stuff, it's not going to work. Sometimes the best stuff happens right after I get off the air. That's what happened yesterday. Did you see Trump just drop this nuke on Vladimir Zelensky? Where, I mean, he called him a modestly successful comedian.
Such a nice man.
Oh, my goodness. So Trump's trying to cut a deal between Ukraine and Russia, right? Trump's highly transactional, doesn't like war, wants to see peace, wants to see an end to this multi-year war between Russia and Ukraine, and he just wants it over because he doesn't want people to die. I really think it's that simple for Donald Trump. Now, of course, there are economic reasons and even more pride reasons beyond why Ukraine might say to itself, hey, we are not ready to come to a deal with Russia. And Russia may say, hey, we don't want to come to a deal with Ukraine. Now, frankly, I think both sides are at the point where they benefit from coming to the table and ending this thing. Russia's dealing with crazy levels of inflation. Putin is not a popular character. The economy is in turmoil over there. They've lost, obviously, tremendous numbers of citizens throughout this war. And Ukraine, the same thing. They've lost hundreds of thousands. Their cities are obviously in serious damage mode. And you wonder how much longer they can keep up the fight on their end. So it makes sense for both sides to come to the table and figure out an off-ramp here. It was one of the major issues I had with Joe Biden's administration and how they handled Ukraine. It wasn't that they were helping Ukraine. Ukraine's obviously on the right side of history here and allowed to protect and defend itself. But it's like, what's the end game? We just keep sending them $5 billion here, $10 billion there, $20 billion here, $20 billion there. And there's no clear goal to how this ends. Unless it was just to outlast the Russians, in which case, how many years are we talking here? Because you're dealing with a guy in Vladimir Putin that doesn't care about the well-being of his people. So you can't think about it through the lens of, well, once there's enough pain in Russia, Putin's going to back off. Putin's going to back off when it's clear that he needs to back off for his own self-preservation. That's it. So Trump's trying to get a deal done. He puts up this post yesterday just crushing Zelensky. And this came after Zelensky had made some comments to the media about how he wanted to be part of the negotiations, and he took a shot or two at Trump in the public, and that was probably a bad idea on his part. Because if you take a shot at Trump, he comes back at you with a sledgehammer. That's how he goes about his business. And Trump writes, think of a modestly successful comedian, Volodymyr Zelensky, talked about the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that could not be won. That never had to start, but a war that he, without the U.S. and Trump, will never be able to settle. He said the U.S. has spent $200 billion more than Europe, and Europe's money is guaranteed, while the United States will get back nothing. Why didn't sleepy Joe Biden demand equalization? In that this war is far more important to Europe than it is to us. He says we have a big, beautiful ocean as separation. On top of this, Zelensky admits that half of the money we sent him is missing. He refuses to have elections, is very low in Ukrainian polls, and the only thing he was good at was playing Biden like a fiddle. Oh, man.
Come on, man.
A dictator without elections, Zelensky better move fast or he is not going to have a country left. In the meantime, we are successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something all admit only Trump and the Trump administration can do. Biden never tried. Europe has failed to bring peace. And Zelensky probably wants us to keep the gravy train going. Trump adds here in his post yesterday, I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered, and millions have unnecessarily died. And so it continues. ...
How about that?
That was quite a novel from Trump yesterday.
Great stuff from him. I thought it was interesting. Zelensky was saying he wasn't going to abide by anything. He wasn't part of the negotiations. And,
yes.
Oh, by the way, I need money.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because one cancels out the other there, doesn't it?
You would think, right?
Yeah.
Here's where my head's at on this. First off, just to get the numbers right, Trump, in typical Trump fashion, he goosed up the numbers a little bit. We've given about $120 billion to Ukraine. The EU has given about $60 billion, $50 to $60 billion, less than half of what we have given. So Trump, as a business guy, is like, hang on a second. This whole war is way more important to Europe than it is to us. Now, I know globalism. I understand, like, we're one big world, and isolationism arguably led to World War I and World War II. Like, I get all that. I understand that caveat. So we've got that history lesson behind us. But Trump's point is this. We've spent a tremendous amount of our taxpayer dollars on this war. And Trump's not saying that we shouldn't have done it. Now, he might think that we've spent too much. That's fair. I think we might have spent too much. But he's saying, if you guys are going to milk us for all this money, I'm not going to have you trash me on the back end. There's no way I'm going to let that happen. And I think for Trump, so much of this, too, is he just has no respect for these European leaders. He has no respect for how they've run their countries. He has no respect for how they've handled immigration. He has no respect for how they've moved very far to the left on social policies and many of their economic policies. And he's right to have no respect for them. You can still work with them even though you don't have respect for them because you have no choice, right? Like in business, sometimes you have to work with people outside of your company who you just don't have any respect for. But you know you got to figure out a way to work with them. But the minute they're trying to make you look like the bad guy, you're going to lay down the hammer. And I believe that's part of what's going on here. Trump's saying, listen, we'll do our job on the world stage. We'll help out where we're needed. But one, we're not going to let you take us for a ride. You've got to have some kind of plan here. Ukraine is toast without the United States' help. So I'm certainly not going to let the leader of that country try to bully us, try to tell us how it is. And that gets back to the whole idea of American exceptionalism. Now, is it different than Ronald Reagan would have done it? Sure. Get over it. It's not the 1980s, okay? Reagan's not coming back from the dead. Trump is who he is. And are there days that that's good? Yes. Are there days when that's a little harsh? Yes. But I'll tell you what, it's refreshing to have a president who stands up and has some balls on the world stage.
There are days when it's needed, and that is today.
And there was nothing when I saw that post where I said, it was just Trump being Trump on behalf of the American people. He's not looking to hang out Ukraine to dry. He's not doing the bidding of Putin in Russia. That's not what this is about. I think he knows what a bad guy Vladimir Putin is. The whole world knows what a bad guy Vladimir Putin is. But the classic talking point that got jumped on yesterday is, here's Trump. He's helping out his buddy Putin. It's like, come on. He's sitting here saying, we're not going to be your bank. We're not going to be your piggy bank and then have you trash us as well on the world stage and talk poorly about us. Zelensky can say whatever he wants and get whatever message he wants to Donald Trump and the United States government directly without going to the media. If he's going to go to the media and try to take a pot shot, he's going to get it back twice as hard. And sometimes Trump does that, and it's overkill, and it's unnecessary. With the way that this country and us, the taxpayer, have helped them out, it did feel in large part like a slap in the face. And I don't think it means that now Russia's going to get a better deal than Ukraine. It was just one step as part of this larger negotiation. It's all transactional. John's in Grain Valley on KCMO. What's up, John?
Well, what's up is not the temperature. I'm cold, Pete. I'm cold. That's what's not up.
I'm with you, John.
But the whole thing, I mean, you're spot on. When people back off, it's like the kid who won't leave your house, hates you, and then says, by the way, before I move out, I need my allowance. And it's the same thing J.D. Vance said, that Europe, NATO, the world, basically, it's a new thing. You can't keep coming back to America, bash us, hate us, and say, by the way, we still want your money. And in typical negotiation, in business, politics, treaties, anything that happens, you go to one side and say, okay, what's your play? What's your make or break? Where are you at right now? Okay, got it. Then you go to the other side and you say, what can you agree on in this? And you move it forward. But Zelensky's got to understand something, and Europe has to understand something. This is a Joe Biden-created issue. Russia always said they would never tolerate Ukraine/NATO on their flank. And what did Biden do? He turned around and said, we're going to put you in NATO. Mm-hmm. And after the Crimea incident, when all we did is send blankets and MREs, he felt that Biden was weak enough that he wasn't going to do anything. And, guess what? The minor incursion Biden said would be okay or acceptable, I believe the word was, is now 3 years in, and it's costing us a fortune. And like Trump said, this is endless war stuff has got to stop. How long were we in Afghanistan, where empires go to die? How long we were in Iraq? Why we went was noble. It's a classic Reagan. Our cause was noble, but. Mm-hmm. And until people start waking up and understanding that and really stepping back from the Trump derangement, and no matter what Trump does is wrong, you got to understand what he's saying. We're not continuing to play this game. Where's the money? Well, we don't know. Well, if you don't know where it is, do we not have a right for accountability? Do we not have a right to say, you know what, until you can start accounting for these dollars, and we haven't even gotten to the reconstruction yet. That's trillions. Guess where that money's going to go? How many NGOs are going to take care of that? USAID. Excuse me. That's it. I'm done. I'm cold. I'm going to work.
All right. Attaboy there, John. There you go. Woo! He's fired up. Going to work. -6 degrees outside. Keep it rolling. Kansas U.S. Senator Roger Marshall shared President Trump's post on Truth Social yesterday about Zelensky and said, there will be no more blank checks to Ukraine under President Trump. It is time for the war to end, and we must put America first. Mark Alford is going to be here at 8 o'clock in studio. I was able to drag him out of his house this morning in this weather, and he is going to be here. I will ask him about this, the ongoing negotiations, and much more on KCMO. You tell me, would you take this deal from Delta? You land on the tarmac. Well, you don't really land, and then your plane ends up flipping, and it's amazing that you're alive, right? 80 people on that plane going from Minneapolis to Toronto, and it ends up flipping on its top, and you got people basically hanging from the ceiling like bats and walking off of the ceiling to get off of the airplane. Delta is now offering $30,000 to each passenger that was on the flight that crashed in Toronto, according to the Minnesota Star Tribune. If the passengers all accept, the company would dish out about $2.3 million. Now, I've spent plenty of time on this show ragging on two-bit huckster attorneys who are looking to sue everybody and anybody after, someone trips on a sidewalk. All right? There's way too much of that goes on around the country. You want to talk about one of the reasons that costs have gone up tremendously around America? Look at the attorneys. And I know that we have attorneys who are listening, and some of you probably cursing me off. That's fine. It's all good. I can take it. But listen, the amount of money that companies now have to set aside and pay out for frivolous lawsuits is just crazy. And major corporations don't want to be bothered. It is cheaper for them to just pay this stuff out than it is to fight it in court. And the attorneys know that. That's why you have these, it seems like every other day, you got a new law firm just popping up with billboards and commercials and everything else. And obviously it also depends on which state you're in terms of how generous or I guess how big of a payout you're going to get in some cases. But either way, Delta offering $30,000 is an insult, an absolute insult. I wouldn't take the money because I'd be sitting there saying, no, Delta needs to learn a lesson here. And the airline industry needs to learn a lesson. $2 million is nothing. That is a drop in the freaking bucket for these companies. They have got to feel a lot more pain, I would argue, to get the point across that you guys have to step up your game here. You do. And you got to make sure that the only thing you're doing is hiring people based on competency. No, I'm not suggesting the people who were flying this plane were incompetent. I'm not saying that at all. We don't know a lot about who was behind the wheel, so to speak, of this plane. But for far too long, and you've seen it from Delta and some of the others, the focus has not been on, hey, how do we make sure we just get the best pilots in here? You know that, and I know that. They bragged about it on social media. You can look at their TikTok pages, their Facebook pages. They've got reels and posts about, their focus on hiring is, well, let's just put it this way. It's not about making sure we get the best pilots. They're not bragging about that. But it is kind of amazing to me that when it comes to Delta and this offer, I thought they might just go out there and say, okay, fine. We'll give you $100 in Delta credit and a couple of food vouchers and call it a day. But at least they offered up $30,000. Still not great, but at least a step in the right direction. 913-408-7957. On the text line, Pete, I'm surprised they didn't just offer up a bag of peanuts. Yeah. Yeah.
Free flight voucher back to Minnesota.
That's right. Oh, man. I put this up on X last night, and somebody responded, and they said, Pete, I heard you can get all the free trips from Minneapolis to Toronto, but it's limited to the month of February. Yeah, because that's definitely going to be a popular flight in the month of February. That is absolutely outstanding.
I'm not worth your Red Lobster money.
Oh, jeez. No way. Not a chance. Oh, that's great. Oh, man. Also on the text line, Pete, thanks for being there on a cold day, doing everything you guys are doing. I am curious to hear, wow, this texter must have read our minds. I'm curious to hear the input on potential $5,000 reimbursements to Americans for Doge. Yeah, that's an awful idea. You want to kick off some inflation? Start kicking back $5,000 to American citizens in the name of Doge. Remember, every dollar that's being cut and saved right now, it's not like it's money that we have. It's just printed money that's technically debt of our kids and grandkids. So if DOGE cuts, $1 trillion, well, first off, we still have $1 trillion deficit on top of that. Right now, we've got a $2 trillion annual deficit. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, I'm not excited about the prospect of giving people $5,000 in DOGE reimbursements because that money still isn't real. It's not like we're talking about running a surplus. If there's ever a time in this country, and if this happens, I will have probably died and, God willing, gone to heaven, where we are running a budget surplus, that's when you talk about kicking money back to the taxpayer. Right? It's kind of like if you're on an HOA board and, I don't know, let's say you have a really good year and you're collecting your dues and your fees, but you end up having a lot of money left in the bank. Like maybe the HOA kicks you all back $50, $100, whatever it might be. If we ever run a budget surplus, that's something you might look at. But you can't give people reimbursements on money that never existed to begin with. You just can't do it. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So it sounds good. It's like politically great where people think they're getting checks in the mail from the government. But it's not real life because it's not real money. I think that's just one of those things that Trump says because it sounds good in the moment and he thinks the American people will like it. And, yeah, there are people that will like it. And I like the idea. I mean, who's not going to sit there and say, yeah, sure, $5,000 a person, this is great. But it's still not money that actually is of any kind of substance or in circulation. It's just all funny money until you get that deficit down from $2 trillion. It's a lot of money for Mark on DraftKings, though, I will say that.
Oh, yeah, it's like the stimmy checks, right?
No, the stimmies that caused a lot of the inflation. Listen, we were going to have inflation even if Trump won in 2020. But then Biden decided he was going to put gasoline on that fire and start spending, buco bucks during his 4 years in office. He kept the spending levels at where they were during COVID, which was the dumbest thing he could have done, and he did that. And that's why we've got these $2 trillion annual deficits we're dealing with right now. So did you see yesterday Trump overturned the congestion pricing in New York City? Now, I know, we're sitting here in Kansas City and you're like, why does it matter? I think there's a broader conversation here, especially since we've got a toll road coming, the 69 highway, whenever that thing gets completed. Now, that will be an optional toll road, but I promise you the government does not ever implement toll roads and then, eliminate them.
Oh, yeah, the I-35 turnpike here lasted for quite some time beyond its original date.
Yes, they always say the tolls will just pay back the building of the road until suddenly they start relying on those tax dollars. And it's like, that's not how this works, okay? So in New York City, they did announce that they were going to have congestion pricing, which means if you went into the city at certain times a day, like peak rush hour, what was going to happen? Well, you're going to have to pay a toll on top of the toll, basically. What are you laughing at there?
I can't imagine. It's ridiculous regular price, right?
The toll's like $15.
And so you don't have a turn around and go back?
Yeah. Yeah,
exactly
right. It's not like, man, I missed the timing. I'm going to turn around.
Throwing you off the bridge, I guess.
So they were going to have They're going to have congestion pricing. Well, Trump did an executive order to get rid of the congestion pricing. Now, as much as I agree with his reasoning behind it, I don't like the fact that he did this. I don't think that a president should be able to basically go out there and say, hey, this state implemented this law, and I don't like that you guys are implementing this law, so I'm just going to remove it for you. Like, that's king-like stuff that if it happened from Biden to a red state, we'd all be freaking out over.
Yeah,
right?
By the way, can he do anything about GA out at the ballpark?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That's so good. So I don't like it because if it was the other way around, we'd be freaking out over it. And I also think that, you know what, in the end, New Yorkers have to wake up and learn how to vote and realize that they vote for complete and utter garbage. And if you bail them out from the worst things their government does, they're never going to learn. Like, they have to suffer at some point enough to realize that these politicians are screwing them every which way. And Trump's heart's in the right place, but I don't think it's, frankly, constitutional. And I wouldn't want Obama or Biden telling, like, Governor Mike Kehoe what laws he can and cannot put into place. I wouldn't want that. It's like, I run my state, you run the federal government. We're a country that's built on state powers. Stay out of this. And let the people of the state wake up and realize the mistakes that they are making.
Trump, you're a citizen of the world now, not just New York. Yeah. Got to get to the tower. I don't want to pay.
But I will leave you, as much as I appreciate what he's trying to do, I will leave you with the most absurd thing that a politician has said, a local politician has said this past year. And it was the comments from the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, on congestion pricing, which, remember, if you don't know the story, was going to be $15. All right. She was going to put in a $15 congestion price on top of the toll, which is like $15. And then they lowered the congestion price to $9. And she acted like she was saving the taxpayer of New York money.
Under this plan, the MTA will implement a congestion pricing plan with a reduced daytime toll of $9 beginning in January. You heard that correctly. It was $15 before, and now it is $9.
No, you don't get to say I was going to steal $15 from you. Now I'm only stealing $9 from you. Therefore, I'm saving you $6. Okay? No. You don't get to pull that. Sorry. I don't want to have to make Mark hit the dump button. You don't get to pull that on people and act like you're saving them money. It's like a guy comes up and pickpockets you and gives you $5 back. Hey, I'm saving. Here's $5. No, that's not how this works. Oh, my gosh. It's such an insult to anybody with common sense. But, that's blue governors for you. When people do that, what they think is a mic drop moment, they're like, man, oh, got him, mic drop. And you're like, nah, that didn't hit like you think it did, John.
You mean the one recently that we had here locally? The moo, moo, moo?
You mustard moo, moo, moo.
Yeah, something like that, maybe?
Yep. Cleaver definitely had one of those a couple of weeks ago. There's no doubt about it. Still, one of the all-time ridiculous rants you will hear from a politician as people applaud him in the background while no one has any idea what he was just talking about. But it happens all the time on television with members of Congress. It's why we're lucky to have people like Mark Alford who actually can talk and succinctly explain issues.
Absolutely.
It is a reason that I think we'll get more people with media backgrounds in politics. Communication is key. Don't get me wrong, Trump is who he is because he's a businessman first, but his ability to communicate after decades in the spotlight in New York City, and yes, being a TV star, certainly helped. It's undeniable. If you can communicate with people and you can connect with people, you can have a future in that line of work. But some people think they've got it, and I'm not really sure they do have it. Case in point, Jasmine Crockett, who's like a JV member of the squad, she may get the call to varsity one day.
Maybe.
But it's going to take a little time for her. And Mark and I were talking about this off the air. There are people in these roles in Congress. There's 435 of them who are there, and some of them are just there to try to be famous. Now, Mark made a living on TV. He's not there to be on TV. He should be on TV more, but I get it. He's still, newer when it comes to members of Congress. But you get people like this, like Jasmine Crockett, who's from Dallas, who goes on The View yesterday and is talking about how her party can start winning again. And yeah, this ain't that mic drop moment that you think it is, Jasmine.
We've got to do better at education. People don't understand. But you will understand when those hospitals in rural America start closing down even more. You will understand when you don't have your Social Security. You will understand when your Medicaid, your Medicare goes away. You will understand as planes continue to fall out of the sky. Soon you will understand why it's important to maybe have somebody that isn't loud and ridiculous, and maybe Sleepy Joe is what we wanted because we could at least sleep at night.
Yeah, that's the truth. Amen, child.
Sleepy Joe is what we needed because we could sleep at night.
God
God save the Queen, man.
I really don't think that hit home the way you thought it hit home there. Nobody misses Sleepy Joe.
It was just one of those stream of conscience babbles that rappers do on the street.
Yeah, that's what it was.
You just grab something that pops in your mind and string it all together.
We miss
Planes
Sleepy
falling
Joe.
out of the sky and all. Come on.
We miss Sleepy Joe because we could sleep at night. Yeah, the problem is the guy was going to sleep, after the early bird special, and no one saw him for weeks on end. That was part of the problem. Okay, and when it comes to this notion that if you cut anything in government, well, the world is going to end. Planes will crash, there will be no Social Security checks, and there will be no Medicare and Medicaid. Listen, we don't have a choice. There will be no Social Security in 7 or 8 years if we don't do something about it anyway. Trump and Elon Musk are doing something that, frankly, Republicans and Democrats, both parties, have failed to do for decades. And the problem is nobody wants to be the politician that has to do something about it because there might be some pain along the way. But if you care about America continuing on as the greatest experiment in the history of mankind, you have to make these hard choices and these hard decisions. But it doesn't mean your Social Security checks aren't clearing next week. It's total fabrication of the truth. I have more examples of that I'll get to coming up next on KCMO. You feeling sexy this morning?
It's like a night at the Roxbury.
It's too cold. Oh, my gosh. Oh, it's good to be here. Happy chilly Thursday morning. Glad you're with us on KCMO. I didn't play a lot of audio from the Elon Musk, Donald Trump interview 2 nights ago with Sean Hannity. We just had a lot going on yesterday, weather, everything else. But the most important thing that came out of their interview was this clip that I didn't see get circulated nearly enough over the last 24 hours. It ties into what we were just talking about with Mark Alford earlier in the hour. He was in studio. The Jasmine Crockett bit that we just played where she thinks she's dropping the mic on Doge and Elon and Trump and, oh, my gosh, we're going to have planes falling out of the sky and no one's going to have Social Security if we, God forbid, cut any spending. It was this from Elon Musk. And if you listen to this clip, it's about a minute long. Elon starts talking. Trump kind of chimes in. And then he defers to Elon, who continues making the case for why this hard work needs to be done. Difficult decisions need to be made. And the politicians have never been incentivized to make them because they have been so focused on their own political futures and their own political power. But it makes sense for somebody like Elon Musk, who's the world's richest guy, has nothing to lose, right? There's no downside. It's not like, actually, you look at it, he's become more unpopular, but he's doing what he knows the country needs to do, and he's not really motivated by power or money because he's the world's richest man. There's no more power or money for him to attain. So I'm not saying he's a perfect human being. Heck, he's allegedly about to have did have his 13th kid with a 4th baby mama. That came out last week. I'm not saying he's like, God's gift, but when it comes to trying to balance a budget and save a country financially, he's saying things that some politicians, Republican politicians in particular, have said for years and have never had the gumption to act on.
I really want to emphasize to people that this is a very important point. If we don't solve the deficit, there won't be money for medical care. There won't be money for Social Security. We either solve the deficit or all we'll be doing is paying debt. It's got to be solved, or there's no medical care, there's no Social Security, there's no nothing. It's got to be solved. It's not optional. America will go bankrupt if this is not done. That's why I'm here.
The president, Europe takes advantage of this.
And I'd like to also just send a message to, because as the president said, there's a lot of rich people out there. They should be caring more about the country, because the reason they should be caring more about the country is if America falls, what do you think is going to happen to your business? What do you think? Do you think you're going to be okay if the ship of America sinks? Of course not. What I'm doing here, what the president's doing, is it's just long-term thinking. The ship of America must be strong. The ship of America cannot sink. If it sinks, we all sink with it.
If it sinks, we all sink with it. He's right. I don't want to sink. I don't want it to sink, when I'm gone and my kids are still around. I don't want it to sink when maybe my grandkids, if they ever, exist, God willing, are around. And that's how you got to think about it. And the politicians have not been incentivized to do it because all they care about is themselves in large part, John.
A rising tide lifts all boats. Mm-hmm. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction.
Yeah.
To his point.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, finally, you've got Trump saying, yeah, it might be a little clunky for a little bit. Yeah, it's not going to be perfect, but we're breaking the things that should have been broken years ago. And he doesn't, when I say he doesn't care, what I mean by that is he doesn't care about what it means for him politically right now. He's got more political capital than he's ever had. And here's the smart part about what they're doing as well. A lot of this stuff is not focusing on like left versus right issues. That's where I think his political opponents are struggling here. Because Trump's saying, there was a report yesterday, they're going to cut Department of Defense by 8%. That's their goal. And like I say, go ahead. Look at the Department of Defense. Look at the Pentagon. They've been failing audits for how many years now? Republicans typically are like, we'll never cut spending for the Pentagon. And Trump's saying, no, look at the Pentagon. And you would think that his political opponents, who would love traditionally to cut Pentagon spending, would say, okay, we can get on board with that. But they're struggling because the things that he's looking at and the things that are being done are not your traditional left versus right things that people would be debating about, right? Which is why you're seeing his opponents revert to the old talking points of Elon Musk is rich and he's just looking out for his rich friends and tax cuts. And it's like, no, most people do not think we should be spending a couple of $1 million on Sesame Street in Iraq. Like, that's not really a left versus right thing. That's just like common sense that most people are going to be able to get on board with. And that's something that's got them all up in arms because it's not falling along traditional party, Democrat, Republican, left versus right lines. And that's why they're all twisted up into a pretzel and they made Elon the boogeyman instead of, Donald Trump, which is actually a fascinating fallout of all this. Whether it's Sharice Davids sending out emails 2 weeks ago, not mentioning Trump's name, only mentioning Elon Musk's name, or, it's Cleaver just making a total buffoon of himself in front of a government building last week.
You muster moo.
It's like, I don't even, and that was something Cleaver bragged about on his Facebook page. His team shared that rant on his Facebook page as if it meant anything. He's breaking them one at a time. What the heck's going on here? 913-408-7957. That's the studio line and the text line on KCMO Talk Radio. Let's go to Austin. You're first up, my man. What's happening?
Hey, Pete, I've just been sitting on this for a minute, though. Got a great viral meme idea. Are you familiar with the movie The Dark Knight?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay. The scene at the very end where you've got the two boats, and you've got citizens on one and convicts on the other, and all the convicts are wearing orange jumpsuits, and there's the warden's holding the detonator, and you've got Tim Tiny Lister, R.I.P., sitting there contemplative. Well, Tim Tiny Lister is Trump in this scene, and Congress is the other inmates in the orange jumpsuits, and the American people are the warden holding the detonator, and Tim Tiny Lister's character says, "Give it to me. I'll do what you should have done a long time ago." 77 million Americans gave the detonator to Trump, and he's doing what Congress should have done a long time ago, but you said it best, didn't have the gumption to do. So there's a free viral meme for whoever wants to make it, but there you go. Thanks, Pete.
All right, that's well done, Austin. Stay warm, buddy. There you go. Nice job. Someone will make that with their AI and send it our way. Let's go to Mike in Olathe. What's up, Mike?
Great segue from that, dude. That was good. But listen, what I was thinking along the same lines is this. Politicians have made themselves relevant all these years. They're the higher class. They're the upper crust. They're this. But there's two people, the most two people that are relevant right now. I mean, really relevant are Elon and Donald and his cabinet. because they're all speaking from the same song sheet. And it's blowing the minds of both sides, both Democrat and Republican, especially the swamp rats. And they're having a really hard time, but most of us are loving it. But I think relevance matters, and those dudes are relevant, and the others have been set aside, much like that guy just mentioned in a meme. In the real world, the relevant guys aren't relevant right now, and they're having a hard time with it.
They are. Thank you very much, Mike. Let's go to Mark in Independence. What's happening, Mark?
Hey, great show as always. And my answer is to what side you're on, that dumb song they sing. Well, I'm on the side that's informed and trying to, and I don't want to get the shaft, versus those that are clueless and they keep going for the gold.
That's well said. Nice job there, Mark. Thank you, buddy. And you reminded me of that awful song that we played last week that went viral from a bunch of, I think they were union workers somewhere.
Oh, which side are you on? Oh. Which side are you on?
Make it stop.
Tell me, which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Everybody
we'll
now.
fight against George. We'll fight Elon Musk. No Elon's kept within our walls. We'll fight from dawn to dusk. Oh, which side are you on?
There you go, Mark.
Which side are you on?
Everybody now.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
All right, that's enough. Now that everyone's ears are bleeding, I guess I'll move on. Would you let the lead singer in the church band there, Mark?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Yeah, I see what you're going for there, but...
Oh, man.